Marcus Johnson sat quietly at the back of the courtroom, watching carefully as Judge William Harrington handled case after case. The 16-year-old high school student had been coming here for weeks, taking notes in a small black notebook. Anyone who noticed him might think he was working on a school project. They would be partly right. Marcus was smart, smarter than most people realized. He had skipped 2 grades and was already taking college courses while finishing high school. But today, he wasn't here for a class assignment. He was gathering evidence. "Another one of you troublemakers," Judge Harrington said loudly to a young black teen standing before him. The boy, maybe 15 years old, kept his eyes down as the judge continued. "I see kids like you every day. No respect for the law, no respect for yourselves." Marcus wrote down the judge's words exactly. He also noted that just 30 minutes earlier, a white teenager with a similar charge had been given a much lighter sentence and a friendly lecture about youthful mistakes. This wasn't new. Judge Harrington had a reputation in the community. Black parents warned their children about ending up in his courtroom. Marcus had heard the stories for years, but it became personal 2 months ago when his cousin Jamal received 6 months in juvenile detention for being in a park after hours, his first ever offense. "You may think I'm being harsh," the judge was saying now to the teen before him, "but maybe you'll learn something from this." Marcus closed his notebook. He had seen enough for today. Later that evening, Marcus sat at his desk at home surrounded by stacks of papers, court records he had collected from public files. His bedroom walls were covered with news clippings and printouts of legal documents. His mother, Tanya, knocked softly before entering with a sandwich. "Still at it?" she asked, placing the plate beside him. "I'm almost finished," Marcus said. "The numbers don't lie, Mom." In the last year, Judge Harrington gave black teens sentences averaging 3.4 times longer than white teens for identical offenses. Tanya looked at her son's work with a mixture of pride and worry. "What you're doing is important, Marcus, but be careful. People with power don't like being challenged." Marcus nodded, but his mind was already racing ahead. Statistics weren't enough. He needed something more powerful, something that would force people to pay attention. The next day after school, Marcus visited the office of Mr. Raymond Wilson, a retired civil rights attorney who had been helping Marcus understand the legal system. "I have all the data," Marcus explained, spreading his papers across Mr. Wilson's desk. "But nobody will care about numbers. I need to show people what's happening." Mr. Wilson studied the young man across from him. "What are you thinking, Marcus?" "I want to experience it myself. I want to stand before Judge Harrington as just another black teenager and record how he treats me. Then I want to reveal who I really am." Mr. Wilson leaned back in his chair. "That's a bold plan, and potentially risky." "I know," Marcus said, "but I've been studying law with you for 2 years now. I know more about legal procedures than most adults in that courtroom, and I've been practicing courtroom speaking since I joined debate team in 6th grade. As they talked through the details, a daring plan began to take shape. Marcus would need a disguise, since he had been observing in the courtroom. You would need to create a minor offense that would land him in front of Judge Harrington, and most importantly, you would need to be prepared for whatever happened next. "This could change things," Mr. Wilson said finally, "or it could make life harder for you." Marcus thought about his cousin Jamal, still in juvenile detention. He thought about all the other kids whose futures were shaped by a judge's bias. "Some things are worth the risk," he said. Over the next 2 weeks, Marcus prepared his plan carefully. Each day after school, he went to Mr. Wilson's office where they worked on every detail. Marcus needed to create a perfect disguise and a believable case that would land him in Judge Harrington's courtroom. "If we're going to do this, we need to be smart about it," Mr. Wilson said, spreading out papers on his desk. "First, your appearance needs to change enough that the judge won't recognize you from your courtroom visits." Marcus nodded. His cousin Tasha was a makeup artist at a local theater, and she had agreed to help. She brought over her professional kit and taught Marcus how to apply subtle changes to his face, slightly fuller cheeks, a different eyebrow shape, and a small fake scar near his left eye. "Now for your clothes," Mr. Wilson continued. "You usually dress very neatly. For this, you need to look like the kind of teenager Judge Harrington expects to see." They chose baggy jeans, an oversized hoodie, and sneakers that were slightly scuffed. The outfit was far from Marcus's usual button-down shirts and pressed slacks. "How do I look?" Marcus asked after trying everything on. Like a completely different person, Mr. Wilson assured him. Next came the legal preparation. They created a fake case, simple trespassing at an abandoned building, something minor enough to not cause serious trouble but sufficient to get Marcus before the judge. Remember, Mr. Wilson warned, this is still against the law. Even though it's minor, you're creating an actual case. Are you prepared for the consequences? Marcus nodded seriously. If it helped show what's happening in that courtroom, I'm ready. They also had to prepare for the moment of revelation. Marcus spent hours practicing his speech, the careful words he would use to expose the judge's behavior without crossing any legal lines. The timing has to be perfect, Mr. Wilson explained. You need to let him show his bias first, before you reveal yourself. Marcus practiced late into each night, standing before his bedroom mirror. Your Honor, he would begin, rehearsing the precise moment when he would transform from a seemingly ordinary teen into the articulate, legally educated young man he truly was. One important part of the plan was documentation. Marcus needed proof of what happened in court. Phones weren't allowed in the courtroom, but Mr. Wilson had a solution, a small, legal recording device that looked like a normal pen. It would capture audio only, which was permitted in this particular courthouse. Just keep it in your pocket, Mr. Wilson instructed. It will record everything the judge says to you. As the day approached, Marcus felt both nervous and determined. He had already arranged for several community members to be in the courtroom as witnesses. His mother was worried but supported her son's decision. Just promise me you'll be careful, she said, helping him try on his disguise at home. Some people don't like having their power questioned. I promise, Mom, Marcus replied. This isn't just about me. It's about Jamal and all the other kids who got unfair treatment. The night before his court date, Marcus couldn't sleep. He went over every step of the plan in his mind. What if the judge recognized him? What if his disguise failed? What if he forgot what to say at the crucial moment? Mr. Wilson had warned him that what he was doing could have real consequences. Once you challenge a powerful person publicly, there's no going back, he had said. But Marcus thought about all the data he had collected, all the stories he had heard, and his own cousin still sitting in juvenile detention for a minor offense. No, there was no going back now. Tomorrow, he whispered to himself in the darkness of his bedroom, everything changes. As morning came, Marcus got ready. He applied his disguise carefully, put on his new clothes, and placed the special recording pen in his pocket. He looked in the mirror one last time, not at Marcus the honor student, but at the person Judge Harrington would see, just another black teenager in his courtroom. The courthouse was busy that Tuesday morning. People hurried up and down the wide marble steps, clutching papers and checking watches. Among them was Marcus, almost unrecognizable in his disguise. His heart beat fast as he walked through the metal detectors and headed toward courtroom 4. Mr. Wilson was already there, sitting quietly in the back row. They had agreed not to acknowledge each other. 3 community members Marcus had asked to witness were also scattered around the room. His mother had wanted to come, but Marcus worried her presence might make him too nervous. Docket number 147, State versus Marcus Williams, the court clerk called. Marcus had used a slightly changed version of his real name. He stood up and walked to the front of the courtroom, keeping his head slightly down, just as he had practiced. Judge William Harrington looked down from his high bench, scanning the paperwork. Marcus could feel the judge's eyes sweeping over him, taking in his baggy clothes, his slouched posture, the small fake scar by his eye. Another trespassing case, Judge Harrington said with a sigh that everyone in the courtroom could hear. What is it with you kids and abandoned buildings? Marcus stayed quiet, waiting for his moment. The prosecutor briefly outlined the case, how Marcus Williams had been caught in an empty building that was marked with no trespassing signs. How you plead? The judge asked, barely looking up from his papers. Not guilty, Your Honor, Marcus said, purposely keeping his voice low. Now Judge Harrington really looked at him, eyebrows raised. Not guilty. The police report says you were caught inside the building. Do you deny that? No, Your Honor, but I believe there are mitigating circumstances, Marcus replied, using slightly more formal language than most teens would know. The judge leaned forward. Mitigating circumstances, he repeated, with a small mocking smile. That's a big phrase for someone who can't read a simple no trespassing sign. Several people in the courtroom shifted uncomfortably. The court reporter kept typing, her face expressionless. "I can read just fine, Your Honor," Marcus said. "Then perhaps you'd like to explain to the court why you think the law doesn't apply to you." The judge's tone was getting sharper now. "I see young men like you every day who think rules are for everyone else." Marcus noted how the judge said "young men like you" while looking directly at his skin color. This was exactly what he had come to document. "Your Honor, if I could explain," Marcus began. "Let me guess," Judge Harrington interrupted. "You were just taking a shortcut. Or maybe you were doing homework in there. I've heard every excuse." Marcus stayed calm, though his hands were shaking slightly. "Actually, Your Honor." "No, young man, you listen to me." The judge cut him off again. "This community is tired of teenagers who don't respect property, who don't respect authority, who think they can just wander wherever they please." The prosecutor looked slightly uncomfortable but said nothing. This was going beyond normal procedural comments. "If more parents kept track of their children, maybe we wouldn't see so many of you in my courtroom," Judge Harrington continued. "Do you even have a father at home? Does anyone make sure you go to school?" Marcus felt a flash of anger but controlled it. This was worse than he had expected, but it was also exactly what he needed to document. "Your Honor, I maintain a 4.0 GPA, Marcus said clearly. The judge looked surprised for a moment, then skeptical. "Is that so? Well, good grades don't put you above the law." "I'm not claiming to be above the law, Your Honor. I respect the law very much. In fact, I study it extensively." Something in Marcus's confident tone made Judge Harrington pause. He looked more carefully at the young man standing before him. "You study law?" he asked with obvious disbelief. "In between breaking into buildings?" Marcus took a deep breath. The moment was approaching. He straightened his posture slightly, but not completely. "Not yet." "Yes, Your Honor, I'm particularly interested in equal protection under the law and in judicial conduct." The courtroom had gone very quiet. Even the people waiting for their cases were watching now. Judge Harrington's face darkened. "Young man, are you trying to be smart with me?" Marcus met his eyes directly for the first time. "No, Your Honor, I'm not trying to be smart." He paused, then added, "I already am." The courtroom fell silent. Judge Harrington's face flushed red as he stared down at Marcus. "Excuse me," the judge said, his voice dangerously quiet. "I don't appreciate your attitude, young man." Marcus stood perfectly still. This was the moment he had prepared for. With steady hands, he reached up and carefully removed the small prosthetic pieces Tasha had applied to his face. He wiped away the makeup that had subtly changed his appearance. Then he stood up straight, no longer slouching, and looked directly at the judge. "Your Honor, my name is Marcus Johnson. I am a 16-year-old honor student with a perfect academic record. I have been accepted to 3 universities already through early admission programs. And I have been sitting in your courtroom for the past month, documenting your treatment of minority youth." A murmur spread through the courtroom. The court clerk stopped typing, her mouth slightly open. The bailiff took a step forward, uncertain what to do. Judge Harrington gripped the edges of his bench. "What is the meaning of this? This is contempt of court." "With all due respect, Your Honor," Marcus continued, his voice clear and strong, "what I've witnessed in this courtroom is contempt for equal justice." From his pocket, Marcus pulled out a small notebook. "On March 3rd, you sentenced Jamal Williams to 6 months in juvenile detention for being in a park after closing hours. 40 minutes earlier, you gave Brian Peterson probation for the exact same offense. The only difference between these cases was the color of the defendant's skin." The judge banged his gavel. "That's enough. Bailiff." But Marcus wasn't finished. "On March 10th, you told a young black defendant, and I quote, 'People like you never learn.' On March 17th, you asked a Hispanic teenager if anyone in his family spoke English well enough to understand the charges. And today, you asked me if I had a father at home, an assumption you've made about 8 other minority defendants in the past month, but never once about a white defendant." The bailiff had reached Marcus now but seemed unsure whether to remove him. The prosecutor was frantically flipping through papers. "Your Honor," the prosecutor interjected, "I'm not sure what's happening here, but the charges in this case appear to be unusual. The paperwork is technically correct, but..." This is a mockery of my courtroom. Judge Harrington thundered. I want this young man held for contempt. From the back of the courtroom, Mr. Wilson stood up. Your Honor, I am Raymond Wilson, attorney at law. I'd like to approach the bench with my client. Your client? The judge looked confused. This boy has created a fraudulent case. No, Your Honor, Marcus said calmly. The case is real. I did enter that building, knowing it was marked as no trespassing. I'm not denying that. What I'm questioning is why you immediately assumed I couldn't read, why you assumed I had no father, and why you spoke to me with contempt before knowing anything about me. Several people in the audience nodded. Someone in the back whispered, That's right. Mr. Wilson walked forward. Your Honor, my client is prepared to accept responsibility for trespassing, but we are also prepared to submit evidence of a disturbing pattern of judicial bias in your courtroom. The judge's face had gone from red to pale. He looked at Marcus with new eyes, no longer seeing a troublemaking teenager, but someone much more complex. What exactly are you hoping to accomplish here? He asked Marcus, his voice quieter now. Marcus looked around the courtroom. He saw the court reporter, her fingers poised above her keyboard. He saw the other teenagers waiting for their cases to be called, watching him with wide eyes. He saw the community members he had invited, nodding encouragement. Justice, Your Honor, Marcus answered simply. Equal justice. A reporter who happened to be in court for another case was scribbling notes furiously. A woman in the third row had her phone out, though she wasn't supposed to, and appeared to be recording. The judge seemed to notice these things too. He took a deep breath and straightened his robes. Mr. Wilson approached the bench with the prosecutor. Young man, you will wait right there. As the attorneys moved forward for a private conversation with the judge, Marcus stood tall. Whatever happened next, he had accomplished what he came to do. He had made his point in a way that couldn't be ignored. And from the expressions on the faces around him, people had heard him, really heard him. Judge Harrington spoke in hushed tones with Mr. Wilson and the prosecutor at the bench. The courtroom remained silent, everyone watching the unusual scene unfold. After several minutes, the judge nodded stiffly and the attorneys returned to their places. We will take a 15-minute recess, Judge Harrington announced, banging his gavel before disappearing through the door behind his bench. The moment he left, the courtroom erupted into whispers. Several people approached Marcus, but Mr. Wilson gently guided him to a quiet corner. You did well, the attorney said. But this isn't over. The judge is calling his own attorney for advice. He knows he's in a difficult position. Marcus nodded, his heart still racing. What happens now? Now we wait, but be prepared, he might try to turn this around on you. When court resumed, Judge Harrington returned with a carefully neutral expression. His earlier anger seemed contained, replaced by something more calculated. Mr. Johnson, the judge began, using Marcus's real name, while your methods are highly irregular and potentially disruptive to this court, you have raised serious concerns that cannot be dismissed. Marcus stood respectfully, surprised by the change in tone. However, the judge continued, his voice hardening, creating a falsified court case is itself a serious matter. You admit to trespassing, which is a real offense, but you did so with the specific intent to manipulate this court's procedures. Mr. Wilson stepped forward. Your Honor, my client's actions, while unconventional, were undertaken to document a pattern of unequal treatment that affects hundreds of young people in this community, if I may. He handed several folders to the court clerk, who passed them to the judge. These contain statistical analysis of sentencing patterns in your courtroom over the past 18 months, sorted by race, gender, and offense type. The disparities are significant and consistent. Judge Harrington's jaw tightened as he glanced at the papers. Mr. Wilson, are you suggesting that your teenage client compiled this legal analysis? I helped organize it, Marcus spoke up. But yes, I collected the data from public records. I've been studying constitutional law and statistics for 3 years now. The judge looked skeptical. And what qualifies you to analyze judicial decisions, young man? This was the opening Marcus had been waiting for. He stood straighter. Your Honor, I completed the Princeton University online course in constitutional law last summer with a perfect score. I've read every Supreme Court decision on equal protection from the past 30 years. and I've been working with Mr. Wilson in his law office since I was 14. Marcus reached into the folder Mr. Wilson handed him and pulled out several certificates and letters. I also scored in the 99th percentile on the practice LSAT I took last month. I plan to attend law school through an accelerated program after I graduate high school next year. The courtroom was completely silent now. Even the judge seemed at a loss for words. Furthermore, Marcus continued confidently, while my methods may be unusual, they are not illegal. I did trespass, and I'm willing to accept the same punishment you would give any other first-time offender for the same offense. All I ask is that it be the same. The prosecutor, who had been quiet until now, cleared her throat. Your Honor, given the circumstances, the state would recommend community service for the trespassing offense, which is consistent with standard practice for first-time juvenile offenders. Judge Harrington looked at the prosecutor with narrowed eyes, clearly suspecting she had switched sides. But he was trapped in a difficult position. The evidence of his biased treatment was being documented not just in Marcus's folders, but by the people watching in the courtroom and the reporter taking notes. Very well, the judge said finally. For the trespassing offense, I sentence you to 20 hours of community service. He paused, then added reluctantly, As for your other accusations, this court takes them seriously. I will be reviewing the materials you've submitted. Marcus nodded respectfully. Thank you, Your Honor. However, the judge added, trying to regain control, I must warn against any future attempts to disrupt court proceedings in this manner. Marcus met his gaze steadily. With respect, Your Honor, I hope there won't be any need for that. All I want is for every young person who stands where I'm standing to be treated with the same respect and fairness. As Marcus turned to go, the judge called after him. Mr. Johnson. Marcus turned back. Your legal knowledge is impressive, Judge Harrington admitted reluctantly. You might have a future in law after all. Thank you, Your Honor, Marcus replied. I'm counting on it. By the next morning, Marcus's courtroom confrontation was everywhere. Someone had recorded parts of it on their phone, despite the court rules against cameras. The video spread across social media like wildfire. Local news stations picked up the story, and by evening, even national networks were talking about the teenager who had exposed potential judicial bias. Teen Legiel prodigy, Kanafran test GEG, read one headline. Another said, High school student US's disguise to reveal courtroom bias. Marcus sat at his kitchen table, staring at his phone in disbelief. Thousands of comments, messages, and friend requests were pouring in. His mother placed a protective hand on his shoulder. Are you okay with all this attention? She asked. Marcus nodded slowly. I didn't expect it to get this big, but maybe it needs to be. This isn't just about Judge Harrington. This happens in courtrooms everywhere. The doorbell rang. It had been ringing all day as reporters tried to get interviews. Tanya Johnson peeked through the curtains. It's Mr. Wilson, she said with relief, opening the door. The attorney entered, carrying a thick folder and looking both tired and excited. Marcus, you need to see this. People are responding to your story in ways I never imagined. He spread several papers on the table. They were emails and messages from teenagers and parents across the country, sharing their own experiences with unfair treatment in the courts. And this, Mr. Wilson said, pulling out a formal letter, came from the State Judicial Review Board. They've opened an official investigation into Judge Harrington's sentencing patterns. Marcus picked up the letter, reading it carefully. They're really taking this seriously. They have to, Mr. Wilson explained. Your evidence was too clear to ignore. Plus, the public pressure is enormous now. Marcus's phone buzzed with another call, the fifth from a national morning show wanting to book him as a guest. He ignored it. What about my cousin Jamal? Marcus asked. And the others who got unfair sentences. That's what I wanted to talk to you about, Mr. Wilson said, pulling out another document. I filed the motion to review Jamal's case based on the new evidence. Several legal advocacy groups have offered to help with similar reviews for other cases. Outside, they could hear more cars pulling up. The story was drawing attention from everywhere. Marcus, his mother said, looking worried, some people are calling what you did entrapment. Judge Harrington's supporters are saying you tricked him and embarrassed the court system. Marcus had seen those comments too, Not everyone viewed his actions as heroic. Some legal commentators questioned his methods, saying the ends didn't justify the means. "I know," he said, "but would they have listened any other way? I tried writing letters about the sentencing differences. I tried meeting with court administrators. Nobody would take a teenager seriously." Mr. Wilson nodded. "Sometimes you have to force people to see a problem they've been ignoring." Marcus's phone rang again. This time it was Principal Davis from his school. "Hello," Marcus answered nervously. "Marcus," the principal's voice came through clearly, "I've been getting calls about you all day. News vans are parked outside the school." "I'm sorry about that, Mr. Davis." "Don't be sorry," the principal surprised him by saying. "What you did was brave. I'm calling because we want to know if you'll speak at our assembly on Friday. Our students need to hear your story directly from you." After hanging up, Marcus turned to find his mother and Mr. Wilson watching him with pride. "This is getting bigger than I expected," Marcus admitted. "I just wanted to help Jamal and kids like him. Now everyone wants me to be some kind of spokesperson." Mr. Wilson placed a hand on his shoulder. "That's because you've given voice to something many people have felt but couldn't prove. You've shown that one person can make a difference." Outside, more reporters waited for a chance to interview the teenager who had stood up to a judge. Inside, Marcus was trying to figure out what to do next. He had started something important, something that might actually change things. Now he needed to see it through. "I think," Marcus said thoughtfully, "we need to turn all this attention into something positive. Something that helps more than just one courtroom." "What do you have in mind?" his mother asked. Marcus smiled. "I have some ideas." 3 weeks after the courtroom confrontation, Marcus sat in a large conference room at the State Justice Center. Around the table were people he had once only read about in news articles: the head of the State Judicial Review Board, representatives from the ACLU, 3 state legislators, and several community activists. Mr. Wilson sat beside him, occasionally nudging him with encouragement. "Let me make sure I understand your proposal," said Ms. Rivera, the head of the review board. "You want to create a youth-led monitoring program for the courts?" "Yes," Marcus replied, his voice steady despite his nerves. "We're calling it Equal Justice Watch. High school and college students would be trained to observe court proceedings and collect data on sentencing patterns." One of the legislators, Senator Powell, looked skeptical. "And you think judges will allow teenagers to sit in their courtrooms taking notes about their decisions?" "Court proceedings are open to the public," Marcus pointed out, "and we're not just collecting stories. We're gathering specific data that can be analyzed statistically." He opened his laptop and showed them the spreadsheet system he had created. A detailed way to track cases by offense type, defendant characteristics, and sentencing outcomes. "Impressive," murmured Ms. Rivera. "But how will you ensure the data is collected properly? These are teenagers, after all." "That's why we need your help," Marcus explained. "We want legal professionals to train our volunteers. Mr. Wilson has already agreed to run training sessions. We have 20 students ready to start, but we need more mentors." The meeting continued for 2 hours, with tough questions and serious discussions. By the end, Marcus had secured commitments from most of the people present. The ACLU offered to provide additional training. 2 legislators promised to introduce a bill requiring courts to publish their own sentencing data. Even Ms. Rivera agreed to help create official guidelines for the student observers. As everyone was leaving, Senator Powell approached Marcus. "You know," he said quietly, "I've been working on court reform for 10 years with little progress. Then you come along with a viral video and suddenly everyone's paying attention." Marcus wasn't sure if the senator was annoyed or impressed. "I'm sorry if I stepped on your work, sir," he said carefully. Senator Powell smiled. "Don't be. Sometimes it takes something dramatic to wake people up. I'm just glad someone finally got through." Outside the Justice Center, Marcus found a small crowd waiting. His story had stayed in the news, partly because Judge Harrington had been temporarily removed from juvenile cases pending the investigation. Some people held signs supporting Marcus. Others had pictures of their own children who they felt had been unfairly sentenced. A woman approached him, tears in her eyes. "My son got 3 years for stealing a bicycle," she said. "A white boy in the same court got probation that same day for stealing a car." Marcus listened to her story, then introduced her to Mr. Wilson, who promised to look into her son's case. That evening, Marcus received news that made everything worthwhile. His mother called him to the living room where a special news bulletin was playing. Following the controversial incident involving teenager Marcus Johnson, the state Supreme Court has ordered a review of all juvenile sentences handed down by Judge William Harrington in the past 2 years, the reporter announced. Additionally, Marcus's cousin, Jamal Williams, has been released from juvenile detention while this case is reconsidered. The screen showed Jamal walking out of the detention center, looking confused but happy as his parents hugged him. Marcus felt tears coming to his eyes. This was what it had all been about, not fame or attention, but real change for real people. His phone buzzed with a text from Mr. Wilson. "This is just the beginning. Your court monitoring program is attracting attention from other states now." Marcus smiled as he typed his reply, "One courtroom at a time." Later that night, as he worked on training materials for the first group of student volunteers, Marcus reflected on how much had changed in just a few weeks. What had started as a personal mission to help his cousin had grown into something much bigger. The news was calling him a hero, but Marcus didn't feel like one. He just felt like someone who had refused to accept an unfair system, and sometimes that was enough to start real change. 6 months after Marcus Johnson's courtroom confrontation with Judge Harrington, the same courthouse looked very different. Signs on the walls announced, "Al court procedentes a recorded for transparency." In the back row of courtroom 4, 2 college students sat quietly taking notes on tablets. They wore small blue badges that identified them as Equal Justice Watch observers. Marcus walked through the security checkpoint, nodding at the guards who now recognized him. He was dressed in a neat button-down shirt and khaki pants, looking every bit the serious student he was. At 17, he carried himself with the confidence of someone much older. "There he is," someone whispered as he passed. Marcus was used to being recognized now, though the attention had finally begun to fade. He entered courtroom 4, no longer Judge Harrington's courtroom. After the investigation, Harrington had been reassigned to civil cases and required to complete extensive training on bias and fair sentencing. Today, Judge Maria Gonzalez presided, one of 3 new judges appointed following the court reforms. Marcus took a seat next to Mr. Wilson, who was there representing a juvenile defendant. The attorney handed Marcus a document. "The final report," Mr. Wilson whispered. "It came out this morning." Marcus opened the folder. Inside was the completed investigation from the State Judicial Review Board. The title page read, "Analysis of Sentencing Disparities in District Court, 2022 to 2024. Scanning the executive summary, Marcus saw what he had known all along. The data confirmed significant racial disparities in sentencing. Judge Harrington had given minority youth sentences averaging 3.2 times longer than white youth for the same offenses. But more importantly, the problem wasn't limited to one judge. The entire system showed patterns of unequal treatment. They're recommending statewide reforms, Mr. Wilson pointed out. Mandatory recording of all juvenile proceedings, regular statistical review of sentencing patterns, and standardized sentencing guidelines. Marcus nodded, feeling a complex mix of emotions. It's a good start. After court adjourned, Marcus headed to the community center where the Equal Justice Watch program now had a small office. What had started with 20 student volunteers had grown to over 100 across 5 counties. They had developed a standardized training program, a secure database for their findings, and partnerships with 3 law schools. Inside the office, Marcus found Jamal working at a computer. His cousin had become one of the program's most dedicated volunteers after his release. "How's the new database coming?" Marcus asked. Jamal grinned. "It's amazing. We can now track cases across different courts and compare patterns. Look at this." He pulled up a graph showing sentencing trends over the past 6 months. The disparities were decreasing in courts where they had observers, but remained high in others. "We're making a difference," Jamal said proudly. Later that afternoon, Marcus addressed a new group of volunteers, high school students from across the city who wanted to join the program. "This isn't about catching bad judges," he explained to them. "It's about making the system better. Most judges want to be fair, but unconscious bias affects everyone. Our job is to provide data that helps courts see patterns they might miss." A girl in the front row raised her hand. Weren't you scared when you confronted that judge? I watched the video like 50 times. Marcus smiled. I was terrified, but sometimes you have to be brave to change things. After the training session, Marcus checked his email. Among the messages was one from Georgetown University Law Center offering him early admission with a full scholarship. Another was from a national civil rights organization asking him to speak at their conference. But the email that made him stop and smile was from a 13-year-old in another state. I saw what you did. There's a judge in my town who treats kids like me unfairly too. Can you help us start Equal Justice Watch here? Marcus began typing his reply immediately. What had started as one teenager's bold plan to help his cousin had grown into a movement that was spreading across the country. As he walked home that evening, Marcus passed the courthouse where it had all begun. The building looked the same from the outside, but inside, things were changing. Not as quickly as he wanted, and not without resistance, but changing nonetheless. Sometimes, he thought, it just takes one person willing to stand up and say, "This isn't right," and then be brave enough to do something about it.